Hello and welcome to the 20th gathering of the Adventure Party on this, the 9th of August. I'm your party leader, Brad Ludwig. We ask that you peace tie your swords, holster your blasters, and make sure you have your lanyard when you are gathered at the meeting table. The second in command here at the Adventure Party excuse me, is Glenn Bittner. He is a movie reviewer on the YouTube show The B-Movie Bunker and is also the creator of the RPG Mistrunner. How are you today, sir?
I'm thrilled to be here with you, Brad.
The voice, and if you're checking out the video version of this, the eyes sell the tale, let me tell you. We are continuing our month-long convention theme here by talking about what it takes to make your own convention. And we're going to be talking with our guest, Adam Loper, this evening. And Adam created and ran the OshCon in Oshkosh, Wisconsin for 12 years and has a vlog called Tabletop Minions as well, and is big into miniature gaming, and we talked a little bit earlier, is also a Cthulhu enthusiast. So welcome to the show, Adam.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
How long have you been doing your show Tabletop Minions?
A little bit over 2.5 years.
Okay.
Before that, I worked for a website called Beasts of War,
Okay.
which miniatures folk kind of know. They're based out of Northern Ireland, and they have very high production value. And I was I was their U.S. correspondent, going to Gen Con and Adepticon and different conventions like that from about 2010 until about late 2012, and then I wanted to start my own channel and kind of do my own thing, and I started that in March of 2013.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Well, we're glad that we can have you here and talk about conventions.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to do is we are going to start our show like we normally do with a game review by Glenn, and we're going to talk about a deck building game. And what is that game called?
It's called Deck Building. Deck Building, the Deck Building game. This game, as it says on the bio, it combines the thrill of building your own deck with the excitement of building your own deck. You and a friend will be competing suburbanites trying to build the best backyard patio deck. It's when I first saw this, I saw it and I'm like, well, that's just the inevitable future of deck building games. It would have to happen that there would be a deck building about deck building, and that's exactly what this is. You're gathering up different planks of wood, so pine or cedar or mahogany or rotten boards to play on your opponent, and then you have to play those boards, hopefully in specific sequences, because the more of the same type of board you have, you multiply their points. You can then add railings, either regular or ornate, a stairway, and then stain them. And staining is important because once you stain something, that means cards can't be played over the top of stained ones. So if someone wants to play a rotten board, they can't play it on one of yours that's already been stained. It's just a quick, fun little filler game for two people. I mean, it takes, I think they say 15 minutes. That's on the high end, I think, of the play time. But it's just a fun little game that I picked up. I saw it actually at a trade show back in May. We just got it in our store, and I saw it again at Gen Con. They were doing demos of it, and I guess they had a pretty decent show at Gen Con, which it's a $10 game. So a $10 two-player game. You really can't go wrong unless the game is absolutely awful, and this one's not awful. It's actually kind of fun. Yeah, you have every card has different screws on it, and the screws, you draw 3 cards in your hand each turn. And what you're going to do is you have 2 buy areas or 2 buy decks. And you're going to be buying cards out of there based on, if you see the image Brad has put up there, every card has a number of screws on them, which is their value. And you can buy cards from the buy pile based on how many screws you have in your hand. So if you have 6 screws in your hand, you can buy up to 6 screws. You can buy, up to a 6 value, although 4 is the highest, and take that into your hand. Your turn consists of 2 actions. You can either purchase cards, which they don't go in your hand, they go in your discard pile, or you can play cards from your hand to your deck or to your opponent's deck.
Nice.
Yeah, it's just a nice little filler game. I mean, we talk about plenty of regular traditional board games and stuff like that, and a lot of them don't take a long time, but I find that having some good two-player games you always want to have some in your collection if you're a board gamer, if you have board game nights, because you might have that one person who always comes early or maybe stays late, or if you have a spouse or partner or someone that plays games and it's just the two of you, it's great to have some good two-player games, and this is a little lighter fare. It's still got some strategy, but it's definitely on the lighter end of the spectrum as far as what you're getting out of a game.
Yeah, and I know that we talked about last week that you could kind of make a game. Let me qualify that. You can make a game out of just about anything. It's the difficult part is making a good game out of anything, and this seems to fall in that category of a deck building game where you are literally building a porch or deck for a house, and you are playing that out between you and an opponent.
Yep, and the maker of it is Christopher. I'll probably get the last name wrong, but Battle or Badel.
I see Christopher Kirkman he's the version artist. I take that back.
Yes, Badel is the designer. He actually also worked on another game I like a lot called Sentinel Tactics, which you've played Sentinels of the Multiverse.
Yes.
Sentinel Tactics is basically the war, kind of like hex-based war game version of that. It's like an actual combat-based minis type game.
How long has that been out?
About a year.
Oh, I had no idea. I saw the televised tournament of it at Gen Con, which was kind of crazy because it was, they had like commentators and multiple cameras and lights, and they were streaming it on Twitch, and I'm watching this on television, and it's all happening in this room over just in there, and I'm thinking to myself, I've never heard of this game. I've heard of Sentinels of the Multiverse, but never Sentinel Tactics.
Yeah, it's a pretty darn fun little game.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested, I got to say.
Its name, what am I trying to say? It's through the same company as well, Greater Than Games.
Yeah.
So they did, Deck Builder is it's their biggest branch off from what they've done, because almost everything they've done is Sentinels
based,
of the Multiverse or Sentinels Tactics, and then and this is definitely not the same as that.
No, and I actually I forgot to grab this from a friend of mine, but he went to Gen Con and he picked up another expansion for my set of Sentinels of the Multiverse, the card game. I'm looking forward to giving that a whirl. So.
Well, and what you do is you play Sentinels of the Multiverse, then you follow it up with Deck Builder, so that your heroes have someplace to relax after vanquishing the villain.
It's important. It's important to relax.
You got to have a little, because not everyone's fighting someone in New York and then go out for shawarma afterwards. Sometimes you have to go over to someone's house and have a barbecue, and you need a deck for that.
Absolutely, you do. All right, and around $10 for a two-player game. That's a heck of a bargain. All right. Well, thank you for that. Definitely going to be checking that out. And are you carrying that currently at Board Game Barrister?
We will be again. We sold out of it already.
Sure.
But we'll be getting it back in.
Okay, cool. See, I need to make a trip to Milwaukee just to bug you for part of a day. Just come with a few $100s and just buy a big chunk of games and take them back home with me.
I won't argue with that.
Fair enough. All right. For the news today, I stumbled across a story. It came out mid-April, but it intrigued me nonetheless. And the story is of a designer who is making 3D models of the monsters out of the original D&D Monster Manual. So he is actually using a 3D printer and a design program to design the monsters as they look in the manual and then printing them out. So you can get as close of a representation to the 2D drawing that's in the original Monsters Manual of an Owlbear or of an Ettin or of Tiamat. And I'm going to pull up...
Or the Dread Gazebo, which is not actually in the...
It's I'm going to share this on YouTube here real quick, and if you are listening to the audio version of this show, go to youtube.com/galacticnetcasts, and there you will find the Adventure Party playlist, where you will find this particular episode under. And as right now, I'm sharing the screen to everyone so that they can see. And this is a story that I found from TechCrunch. And you get a little bit of the sense of scale. Right next to this figure is a D20. So it's definitely in the 32 to 28 millimeter range. And then looking at this, yeah, so I'm not going to play the video necessarily, but you see the Owlbear. This is how it looks in the 3D program that this person is working with. And then after he's done designing in 3D and then printing out, then he goes through and he paints them. And unfortunately, this particular story, hang on, let me see if I can find...
That's just an episode of D&D.
But the Tiamat, which is the 5-headed dragon, which is basically red dragon, white dragon, black dragon. I mean, just basically think of all the really evil dragons and put their heads and necks on one body on this monstrous dragon, and that is Tiamat. And that was like one of the ultimate monsters that you could run into.
I think there was also possibly a plaid dragon head in there too.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure it was red, black, white, plaid, and taupe.
Houndstooth.
Oh, Houndstooth. That's right. They changed it from the original.
Well, because they got in trouble with the Burberry, that they didn't have the...
See, that's special licensing that you need to pay for that. They don't mess around. That is for sure. Yeah, and this is, I mean, we're talking, this is Gygax era stuff. So it's the original stuff. And the wonderful thing about this is that obviously he's designing this from copyrighted material, so he's not charging at all for this, and the files are available to those folks who have a 3D program and have a 3D printer, so that his work that he's putting into this to take the 2D representation in the book and making a 3D replica of it, and it's available for anybody who has the ability to 3D print with their computer to print out their own version of this particular of the different monsters that he's gone through and designed. So definitely a labor of love. I mean, you have to really have a great appreciation for the original D&D. And the designer's name is Miguel Zavala, and I may or may not be pronouncing that properly. But he has an alphabetical collection, features creatures like the Owlbear, like I said before, the Ettin, and even Tiamat. All the models, including inexplicably a few Pokemon, are free to download, and most are split into multiple printable parts. So, depending on the size of 3D printer that you have, I know that at Sam's Club they actually have a 3D printer that I believe is about $1,300. It could easily print out a 32 to 28 millimeter scale figure, but some folks might not have that capability, or
the quality may not be great for that particular scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We bought the director of education where I work recently bought a Dremel. Dremel makes a 3D printer now. It costs about $1,000, and it's not bad, but the quality isn't super high end.
Yeah, and it really we're at a point now where 3D printers are a lot less expensive than they were, but there are so many different companies and so many different types of approaches taken to actually do the printing. Now there are some that are like spool fed, and I'm not sure exactly, is the one that
the Dremel I think is spool fed, yeah.
Okay. So you have some that are spool fed, and then there are even more expensive higher end ones that actually print using UV light. I've seen that.
Or UV lasers, yeah.
Yeah, and
A bath of like a polycarbonate or a resin or
yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
and it moves so fast that and it's printed, and you'd have to look up the video.
Hmm.
It's video of somebody 3D printing a small version of the Eiffel Tower in this particular suspension and UV laser.
Hmm.
And literally, as it is, basically this tray is lifting up slowly, but it's lifting up at a steady pace, and it is printing out the Eiffel Tower, even with all the openings between all the like the beams in real life.
Hmm.
It is just slowly raising out of this bath, and it is printing this out as it goes, and it's just absolutely spectacular, and it looks like it has really good definition and what resolution, a very high resolution to the print. So, I mean, we are still in the infancy of, especially for smaller scale items that are being printed. A larger one, it's not as critical. But once you get to smaller 28 to 32 millimeter, resolution is everything. So, but if you are a huge fan of the old D&D monsters and want to have your own, scaled, regular scaled miniature version to use in a game, and you have the means to actually 3D print, this may actually be for you. And we'll have a link in the show notes so that you can find out more. And if you do have the ability to print that out, you can go to Miguel's site and get those files and download those and print them. So it's just really, really fascinating. I would love to see a follow-up to this story, because this story was originally printed April 13th of this year, so about almost 4 months now. So it'd be interesting to see if he's done the entire catalog or where things are at. Now, and kind of sticking with the theme of miniatures, Adam, you are a big miniature gamer.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you had the capability to 3D print, and you could get a royalty-free, I'm going to make sure that caveat is there, a royalty-free army that you could print up, would you do it? And would that depend on the quality of the printer?
It would depend on the quality and the price. Last week at Gen Con, there was a company there called, I believe they were called Hero Forge. And,
oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, and Hero Forge has a website where, I don't know if it's Flash-based or if it's HTML5 or whatever, but it's interactive. You can say, I want a fantasy figure or a sci-fi figure or a modern figure. And if you go sci-fi, they're like, well, do you want a male, a female, a robot, that kind of stuff. So you can pick these things, and you basically can kind of design by picking parts and saying, oh, the sword goes in his left hand and the pistol goes in his right hand. You can make yourself a figure and then say to them, I would like this printed in one of many different ways. What's happening there is that when you say you want it printed, they're actually sending that file to a company called Shapeways. And Shapeways is I think Shapeways is going to be the way that most people are going to do 3D printing in the future, because instead of going out and buying a 3D printer, you just send off the file to someone and they make a 3D print, and then they send it back to you. That's what these guys are doing. They're designing, they're helping you with the physical design.
Sure.
And they send it to Shapeways, and then Shapeways ships it to you. The stuff that they had there, the highest quality stuff, wasn't bad. And I looked at it and I thought, I could probably make something and then have them print it, and it would probably look okay. It wouldn't be super high detail, but it would be pretty high detail. But that's $25 for like a single figure. So if you were going to try to do a normal, let's say, and Glenn knows this from playing miniatures as well, if you were going to do like a 40K army, $25 per figure would get real costly really quickly. Even something like a Malifaux game from Weird Games, that's usually 6 to 8 figures. Well, if you're paying $25 a pop, Now, granted, if you had a high enough quality machine at home, the price would be considerably cheaper. But yeah, you'd have to know how to create these things a little bit, or it's not there yet, but it's getting there, and these are the steps that are going to take us forward, I think.
Huh, yeah, I'm going through. It's heroforge.com, and yeah, you're right. This is a very interesting interface here, and you can actually, as you are going through, it gives you genres, and then gender and race, and then you can pick out whole outfits, or you can go through and you can. It even has a thing for headwear as an earring loop, so you could actually make these figures.
Yeah, it's very detailed. Like, you can get down to, like, I've built a couple of different, just messing around with it, I built a couple of different, like, either modern or futuristic, and you can put, like, you know, ammo pouches. Do you want it to the left or to the right, and that kind of stuff. And it's really quite, it's neat. And not only do they do the normal, you know, whatever, 28 to 32 millimeter figures for about around $25, they can do them also in steel or in brass, and they can also do them kind of huge, like about 6 to 8 inches tall. But then you're looking at a couple $100, I think.
Yeah. Looking at the material and scale, like you're talking about, 30 millimeter is what their size is, and they do have the option for 2 times the scale, and then 4 times. They have ultra detail plastic, which would help with the resolution.
Yeah.
They have strong plastic, and then they have steel and bronze.
Bronze, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they had stuff there at Gen Con, because that was the thing. I've been hearing about these guys for a while, but without actually being able to pick up a figure and look at it close, I was kind of concerned. And they even had some stuff painted in the ultra detail, and it looked not bad. You know what I mean? But again, you're talking about $25. If you wanted to make a specific figure that you used in a role-playing game that was your character, $25 is not that big of a deal. Yeah. But if you were trying to field an army, well, then it becomes very difficult.
Then it becomes very costly. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, boy, if you're hearing this, go to heroforge.com and take a look at this, because that's really fascinating. And I'm kind of wondering, you know, and we've talked about, Glenn and I have talked about in the past with 3D printing allowing you the ability to kind of prototype games. We're talking like board games and stuff like that, and being able to kind of do a proof of concept, which I think would be very interesting, to be able to pump something like that out and then go to possible investors and say, okay, here's a rough version of what this game is going to look like. I can see that as time goes on, it's a little cost prohibitive still right now. It's gotten a lot better, but it's still a little cost prohibitive. But I see that can maybe bring us into maybe another renaissance again. Well, that's kind of overstating the fact, probably, but I think it's going to lend.
Right now, for what people are trying to do within gaming, I think it's still cost prohibitive, because you have to have a relatively high-end machine that's quite expensive to get the quality that you're looking for at that scale. That being said, people who are more engineer, bent, are loving it right now, because they can get these machines for $1,000. There's a woman I work with, and her husband built his own quadcopter.
Okay.
And all the parts came out of his 3D printer. Nice. So he designed everything, you know, other than the propellers and the motors and stuff like that, but all the struts and the chassis and all that jazz, he was able to figure out what he wanted and do stuff and then print it out, you know. And it doesn't have to look, you know, perfect and smooth and nice. It just needs to be sturdy and the shape that he wants. And so, those people at this point right now are real happy with what's going on. But the people like me that are more into the modeling, we're still waiting. But we know it's coming.
Sure. Okay. Cool. Glenn, would you, if you had the ability to take a long-standing character that you've been playing, and would you drop $25 to have the figure made?
No. I mean, I don't know. Probably not. But that's me, and I have so many minis that I really wouldn't bother.
Sure.
And also, I mean, I know people who have 3D printers, so I would just have them do it cheaper. Hopefully.
Fair enough. It's good to have friends. It really is. This story's on TechCrunch, and we will, like I said before, we'll have the link in the show notes for you to go in and take a look. and judge for yourself. All right, next up we have Galactic Gaming News from Ryan Murphy, and he is a regular contributor to Galactic Netcasts, and he covers more of the digital beat of gaming, console and computer gaming, and he has yet another update for us. So take it away, Ryan. All right, thanks a lot for that report, Ryan. Appreciate that. Next up here, we're going to go to our Kickstarter Spotlight, and we are going to recap last week's game called Ninja Camp. And that was a game that you brought to us, Glenn. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I do. Ninja Camp. Ninja Camp. Card game for 2 to 4 people. Plays in about 30 minutes, where you are members of different animal clans attending Ninja Camp, trying to become the apprentice of Sensei Saru. It's just a fun little game where you're trying to collect different moves to prove that you are the best pick for Sensei Saru to be his apprentice. They were looking for $10,800. Where I don't know where some people come up with their goals. They must do the math. Well, to the exact penny, we need $10,800. They have 9 days left. They are currently sitting at $24,469, so they have definitely hit their goal. So this game is definitely being made. Well, they've hit their goal. With some stuff that has happened, I'm not going to say it's definitely being made, but it most likely is being made because they reached their funding goals. They have unlocked several stretch goals, including new clans, new ninjeeples, which is the little ninja meeples. So they're almost ready to unlock another clan, which is at $25,000. So, and the game's got some good buzz already. There's, people from GameWire has already said some good stuff about Rado or Rado. I always pronounce him wrong, but he does all these different run-throughs of games. He's done run-throughs of so many different board games online. He likes it, so I mean, it's got some good press behind it as well. So, and it just looks like a fun, like family type game. You can play with an all age kind of thing, or almost all age. I'm sure like a 2-year-old wouldn't play much. They might just nibble on the cards, but.
When we talked about it last week, it was very much a family-friendly game, where it's not blood and gore. You are trying to become the apprentice to a ninja master, and that's the purpose of the game. So it's very family-friendly, and that's really cool. And last week was the week where everybody got to see me while you were talking, actually back. This particular game, because I forgot that I still had my screen share up. So yes, there you go. And it's a $19 game. I mean, to get in on it, and for what you get, and for the number of people that can play, that's a bargain. So definitely something that if you have a gaming closet, like I'm sure some of us do, this would be a nice addition to that closet of games. Absolutely. No, that's really cool. Well, our spotlight for this week is a game called Random Encounters, the RPG card game. And here's the little write-up for it. Do you and your adventuring party have what it takes to survive the abandoned kingdom of Algaris? Find out with this cooperative role-playing game where you and your friends will team up to battle monsters, evade traps, and challenge fearsome bosses at the end of each of the 3 chaotic levels. I'm gonna share the screen here so those that are actually watching us on YouTube can see what this is all about here. The artwork is, I'd want to say anime-ish. I think is that a word? Anime-ish?
I think that's a ethnicity.
That's Aramaish. That's
that's right.
I think that's the original language of. Anyway, yes.
There we go. Here we go. And it's a very interesting game where it's basically you and your party are traveling dungeons, and you are having random encounters in said dungeon. If you are checking out, excuse me a second. Excuse me. If you are checking out the screen on YouTube, you can see that it has a lot of pieces to this. There's I don't want to say a large rule book, but there's a rule book there, and you've got counters, dice. Looks like there's a chart and cards. The features of this game are kind of interesting. No DM required. In this adventure, it's the players versus the deck of encounter cards. Just open the box and your quest is ready to begin. Did someone show up late to the game? That's fine. Players can leave in or out of the group as the adventure goes on, like an arcade beat-em-up. They call it a gateway RPG. Random Encounters takes influence from both tabletop and digital role-playing games in order to create a streamlined adventure that is perfect for those new to RPGs or board games. A new path appears with 75 encounter cards, 75 loot cards, and 9 bosses spread across 3 levels. Each game provides a different experience. Will you battle the Great Golem or the Lord of the Jellies? Is that really a treasure chest or a mimic? So definitely tongue-in-cheek, fun, quick. I guess they're quote-unquote a gateway drug to getting into RPGs or board games. If you haven't really, I mean, if you're listening to this, obviously you play games, so that's probably not the appeal. The appeal probably falls more in. It kind of sounds to me like a bit like.
Munchkin?
Oh man, Munchkin. Thank you. I was going to say John Kovalich's game, but it's the game that he draws for. But yeah, Munchkin. But in a board game format, which is very interesting. We'll have a link to the Kickstarter where you'll be able to see the demo video for the game with a couple of characters, and you can see how the game runs. And to get on board with this at the base level, you're looking at $39 gets you in the door, which, you know, we've been talking about the average price of a good board game typically in the $50 range. So this is definitely below that level for a game that has this level of, I mean, we're talking 75 room cards, 75 loot cards. There's a lot of stuff in here, and that's a good price for something like that. Right now they have 309 backers. Their goal, again, we talk about that strange number. Their number for their goal is $20,635, and they are, gosh, they're about $4,000 away. 4,500, I guess, to be more accurate. And there's 7 days to go, so they're down to the wire, but things are looking good, at least at this point. And I really hope that they launch this, because it sounds like a really fun. I hate to say family-friendly game again, but it seems to be along that vein. Because I would classify Munchkin as a family-friendly game.
Sure.
Not too much weird stuff in there, so
they'll make it. We don't bring any dogs to this show. I'm pretty sure everyone that we've talked about has been funded, so.
I think so too. We've had a good record so far, knock on wood, and I think that while they are 7 days down, I think that they're going to make it. So we'll find out next week when we do the show again. It'll be in the recap, so we'll see where we're at and if our record still holds as picking.
Tune in, same Kickstarter time, same Kickstarter channel.
Now, I'm going to throw this out to you, Adam. Does that type of game appeal to you? I mean, would you bring that to the table on, like, say, a game night?
No, probably not. Mostly, Something has kind of happened to me in the last, I don't know, 3-4 years. I seem to be predominantly interested in mostly just miniatures games.
Okay.
I just haven't been finding. Admittedly, I'm interested in Sentinel Tactics, but that's kind of a war game, you know.
Yeah.
And there are games out there that are sort of hybrid or gateway games that are like a board game, but they have a lot of miniatures. I don't want to say tropes, but miniatures concepts in there, you know, range, positionality, things like that. Those I'm still kind of interested in, but a standard, like a lot of board games, I just don't play them as much as I used to. I don't really play a lot of card games as much as I used to. And I don't know if I don't think it's an age thing. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's maybe just the cycle of life, of a gamer's life. I'm not sure exactly.
Right.
But yeah, I'm mostly focusing these days on miniatures, you know, painting and building and that kind of stuff. I'm one of those guys who does like the craft of it, and I'm not a competitive player. I like to get together and play and have fun, but I do like to spend a lot of time in the basement gluing my fingers together, so there's that too.
Sure, and you know that, I mean, assembling and painting figures, especially probably at the level that you're at, is almost a full-time job. I mean,
it can be. It certainly can. It would be if I actually took care of all the stuff that was in my basement. I'd have to. It'd be possibly 2 full-time jobs.
Sure, and you know, everything kind of ebbs and flows in cycles. You know, maybe at some point you'll find yourself like, gosh, you know, I really kind of miss playing game X, and you put the paintbrush down for a little bit to give it a go.
Yeah, that's possible. I used to play. I mean, we used to play Dominion from time to time.
Oh, sure.
I'm trying to think of other. My wife is a big fan of the Mayfair train games. You know, like Eurorails and things with the crayon.
Sure.
And
yes.
I can't play any of those. Those will make me die. I can't. It's just 6 hours of crayon, and I can't do it. But she and several of our friends do enjoy it, so that's good.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. A game that takes longer than 3 hours to play, I'm not as convinced to play.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Well, all right. Well, we'll check back next week, and we'll see how well Random Encounters, the RPG card game, does, and if they are fully backed. All right. So now we're going to go into our discussion of running your own convention. And it's interesting having the two of you here talking about that. One, because Glenn has GlenCon in Milwaukee, and that's, you know, kind of a low-key day of game, or actually a weekend of gaming. Sorry, which includes card games, board games, but it's just people. It's free. People show up and then they can play whatever they want, and it's. I don't know how familiar you are, Adam, with GlenCon, but they don't measure the game in the number of games they have. It's measured in actual area of the games that they take up.
Mm-hmm.
They have a wall of 7 foot high by about 14 feet long that, when fully assembled, and there's a picture of it somewhere on the internet where you can see this huge wall of games.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a perfect opportunity to get exposed to a lot of different games quickly. But that's a different type of, that's one type of convention. Now, with your history of creating OshCon, and we're definitely going to go through all of this,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that there's probably a different approach to that for a game convention that, well, actually, why don't we just have you talk about it? How did OshCon come to be? Let's start there.
It mainly came to be because I wanted to run a convention, and there wasn't one in town. Honestly, it was maybe more of there wasn't a convention in town, and so I wanted to run one. I'm not sure which. When I was younger, like in high school, I went to a sci-fi convention that was in town, and that was a very small thing, like at the the VFW or something like that, and I enjoyed that. It was just kind of fun, and I've always been interested, for some reason, in event coordination, and like I was like, oh, I really want to make the badges, and I want, because I'm a graphic designer, so I'm like, oh, I want to make the badges, and I want to make the programs, and I want to make the logo for it and all that stuff. There was also a local convention in the late 80s, early 90s in Neenah, Wisconsin that was called StarCon, and it was put on by a game shop that's been closed for probably 25 years now. Oh. And that was like, again, in like a Union Hall or a VFW, and it was small, and I enjoyed going to that kind of thing. So I kind of had those memories and those experiences in the back of my mind. And then in '93, I started going to Gen Con, which was the opposite end of that spectrum.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, even then, it was still, in the early to mid '90s, it was still probably, what would you say, Glenn, somewhere around 20,000, 25,000 people showing up?
Probably around there, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, now it's over 62, I believe this last one was. So it was still, immense in comparison to anything else I had been to. And I think that probably also spurred me to some degree, and I wanted to kind of do something like that. But the biggest problem was trying to find the space. That was the hardest part. So
sure. In the process of, I guess I'd like to look at it this way as a comparison. GlenCon is a smaller event, mm-hmm. and OshCon, or if we were to look at Gen Con, a much larger event. A lot of people attend that. What did you find over the 12 years that you worked on OshCon? When you started, it was probably a little bit smaller. As it grew, what changes did you have to make to deal with that kind of upscaling of attendance?
One of the things that I did was I slowed down how much advertising I did, because I didn't want it to get too big.
Okay.
When I started, I think we were pulling in 50 to 75 people during a 2-day, and it was. I started in, I think it was 2001, and I found a space in Oshkosh, and it was the basement of the Masonic Temple.
Okay.
So I was able to rent that for pretty inexpensive, and they already had tables, which was great, and chairs and such. So I got a couple of vendors in there. A friend of mine owns the local comic shop, and so he came in, was a vendor. And another friend of mine is selling used books, and so he was a vendor, and we organized games. This, GM will come on and say, I'm going to run this game from this time to this time, and I'm going to do this from this to this, and then so we made a list, and so there was a schedule. You could look online. I think I had a website from the word go.
Okay.
So even in 2001, so that people could look, and for me it was, if I'm going to go to a convention, if I don't know what's going on there, and I don't have any pictures of it to look at even, then I'm a little dubious, and so that's kind of a thing. So I always tried to have photos, of the previous years, and I always tried to have an event calendar so people could see, and obviously, being gamers, we're procrastinators to some degree.
Sure.
So they'll let, people would finally sign up just before so all of a sudden the list would go being kind of anemic, a month or so out, and then all of a sudden it would get very, very full, right just before the convention. But yeah, as far as what changed over time, the big thing was the amount of time that I kind of had to chase down vendors, the amount of time that I had to, try to figure out how to fit all these different requests for different games, into the available space. I had been in the basement of the Masonic Temple for several years, and then it got to the point where I had to move over to the university, and then I had space over there, and that worked out pretty well. They were always really great to work with. So, and then the bonus was too, people who wanted to come from long distances, they could stay in one of the dorms, because it was right, there was the Grunhagen Convention Center, and it was basically the same as the other dorm that was right across the street. It's just they were using it more for convention center, but it still had 8 floors or whatever of dorm rooms, so people could come and stay for $35 a night.
Oh wow!
Oh yeah, it was really inexpensive, and granted, it was dorm like bathroom facilities and stuff like that. And but there were 2 beds in the room, so if you split it with somebody, it was really, really reasonable. So that helped us to get people coming from, Milwaukee and even further away. We had people come from as far away as, I think, Rochester, Minnesota, and so that was kind of cool.
Huh. Now, as the scale increased over time, how important did delegating tasks to others? Did you end up having to do that? And if so, how much did it take stress off of you? And did it make things flow a little bit easier to put things together?
I am the wrong guy to ask about that because I don't like to delegate, as it turns out, which is a character flaw. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I honestly did pretty much all of it until the actual days of the convention, and then I usually had a couple of friends who would help and like sit at the front table and help, and like take money and write badges and do things like that and everything. But everything up to that, yeah, I was the only guy. I was the guy who did all the flyers and the social media stuff and worked with the vendors and worked with the GMs and made the program and did all that jazz. Mainly just because I have a hard time letting go. It seems, I don't know.
Okay.
The people who kind of took it over, it's no longer called OshCon now. It's called Northeastern Wisconsin Gamepalooza.
Okay.
And they're doing a great job, and they're also delegating. Like it's not just one person. It's a group of people. So because of that, they've expanded into, they have an auction room, so people can come and do, like a gaming, not like a live auction, but like here's a bunch of stuff, and then you can write down bids and stuff like that. I guess they call it a silent auction.
Okay.
They're doing that. I think they had a costume contest, which I never really had the time nor the inclination, frankly, but never had the time, certainly, to do. So they're doing towards the end, I started getting a little bit into door prizes. They've taken that and really run with it, and that's becoming a popular thing. So, yeah, I mean, delegation is, I think, important because it allows you to do more things, and it allows you to take stress off of the person who's kind of running things, I think. But,
Sure.
yeah, I guess I don't think I ever learned that rule.
Okay. How did you promote the convention? What media venues did you go through?
Well, when I started, it was a lot of flyers. I mean, I had a website because I'm a web designer.
Okay.
And so that was not a big deal. But, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, there was none of that stuff. So you had to try to get people to come to your website. And you kind of had to basically, I don't want to say go door to door, but I would go to other conventions and bring flyers.
Sure.
If they allowed it, which almost all conventions, all small conventions, have no problem letting you, kind of cross promote that way. And but I would also send flyers to other conventions, and they would send me flyers back, and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of the way to promote early on. And I will admit, even after doing it for a decade plus, I would still run into people in town who are gamers, and I would mention the convention, and they would say, "Oh, I've never heard of that." I'm like,
Sure.
Did you just move here? No, I've lived here for 10, 20 years. And you're like, how did I not get the point across to you? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, how do I miss that? I would go to the local comic shop and put up flyers in the coffee shop, and pretty much any place that I thought gamers might hang out that would let me put up flyers. Nowadays, obviously, Facebook would be a humongous thing for that kind of situation. Social media of all different types of stripes would work out really, really well for that kind of stuff. And the flyers, are a little bit less of a thing, but, it doesn't hurt. I used to also put up a PDF on the site so that you could print off some flyers if you wanted to in your local area and put them up,
sure.
Your local shop or whatever the deal was.
Okay. What would you say, looking back at your experience, what was the single hardest thing to put together for the convention? Be it booking the venue, getting the vendors, what would you say was the hardest thing to accomplish?
I honestly think the hardest part is finding the venue, and finding a venue that's going to work well with you, that's going to be reasonably priced, where the people that run the venue are, on the same page as you. They're there to play. between the Masonic Temple and where we ended up at the university, there was a year where the Masonic Temple was going to be sold, or they were preparing to try to sell it. So they were like, well, we don't really want to run any events right now. We're trying to sell the place. So I said, okay, well, it's, you know, we are literally kind of outgrowing the area, so it's probably for the best. So I went over to our local convention center downtown, and I started talking to a guy there, and I paid like a $75, you know, deposit, and went through all of that, and we had everything planned and the dates, and we knew like the space and how many chairs and tables and all that stuff. I was drawing diagrams of where all the tables were going to go, and then the Wednesday before the convention started, I got a call early in the morning from someone at the convention center, and they said, our maintenance guy needs to talk to you about tables and stuff. And I said, okay, that's great. And so they switched me over to him, and I started talking, and then he said, what time were you planning on being here on Saturday? And I said, well, I mean, the convention starts at 10, but I was planning on probably myself getting there at 8 to help set some things up and this and that and the other thing. And then that's when he said, we have an event in that room until 3 p.m.
Oh, no.
And I said, how? Well, yeah, they just completely, they double booked it and just assumed it would be okay if we started about 8 hours late.
Oh, jeez.
So luckily I was in a position at the time where I could call my boss real quick in the morning and go, I need to take the day off because this is what happened, and he was cool with it. And so I scrambled, and that's how I found the university, because I just started calling anybody I could think of who had the space that might work, and they were great to work with the entire time, and they're still great to work with. Like I said, the convention that's kind of grown out of OshCon is still using the exact same space over at the Grunhagen Center because it's a great space. I mean, my fear is that they will maybe eventually outgrow it because they're doing a better job than I am, and they want to grow more. There's still a little bit of space. I mean, there's the housing space is no problem.
Yeah.
It's just the actual gaming space where I think I could see stuff getting tight. So I've talked to people over the past couple of years who have been interested in running conventions and doing things like that, and they've asked me some of these same questions, and it's always the hardest part is finding the right venue. That's really the difficult part. I know there's a couple people in Milwaukee that were looking at, kind of trying to start something smallish, and this is before the two. I know there's Nexus Game Fair that's in Milwaukee. They're doing really well, and there's another one, Midwinter, right, which is more of a LARP convention, but they're trying to move into conventional tabletop gaming. But they've already got a space, so they don't have to worry about it. But before those two really started moving into the tabletop space, Glenn and I both know a couple of people that were kind of kicking around ideas, and the hardest part is always trying to find that venue. So.
Sure. Okay. Now, like you talk about laying down a deposit. Mm-hmm. Financing is definitely a part of a convention, making sure that you've got everything kind of set up ahead of time. There's probably fees for securing the venue. Depending on the venue, if they don't have tables and chairs available, you have to find some provider for tables and chairs for the venue. Mm-hmm. How would you go about securing financing for an event of this nature?
If you can't afford it, you shouldn't do it, is my opinion.
Okay.
Frankly, I have seen people online, not necessarily a gaming convention, but there was a convention out in Connecticut, I think, and they were going to do this big kind of like anime, video gaming, whatnot convention, and they were going to have special guests. They were going to fly in, and they were going to do all this stuff and all that, and they must have taken some sort of humongous loan or something, and then just people sort of, from what I understand, I don't want to say they stayed away in droves, but they didn't show up like they thought they were going to, and then they were sitting on literally like a $15,000 or $20,000 bill. So don't, in my opinion, don't ever do that. One of my mottos, if I had a motto, would be start small and grow slowly, and that's really, when I started the convention initially, I think it maybe cost $150 or $200 to rent that basement for the weekend, and they already had tables and chairs, and so that was great. So if you can't afford to lose that, basically, just outright, then, well, you might not want to do this. But if it's cool, you just, not going to buy games for a couple of months or something like that, you get some vendors in there. We were charging the vendors, I think, $25 a table for the weekend. Well, if you get 10 vendors, that's $250, and that's covering a bunch right there. So, I mean, really, your main expenses are the venue itself, printing for, say, flyers and maybe stickers and programs if you want to go that way. Although it's becoming more and more of a thing that if you really wanted to, you could just have the programs be, a mobile, web page on, so people could just bring it up on their smartphone. We were actually starting to do that towards the end. I was programming that so that people could walk around with the printed, programs, but they could also just have it on their smartphone. I had a QR code on the wall so they could zap it and it would take them right there.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's an expense. Frequently, depending on the venue, insurance is an expense.
Oh yes, forgot about that. Yeah.
Like when I was at the Masonic Temple basement, the insurance was never a thing because we were evidently using their insurance. But when I moved over to the university, the group of regents, the triumvirate of regents. I'm not exactly sure what they're called at the University of Wisconsin, but the council, maybe the Dark Council of Regents. They said that we had to have something like $1 million of insurance, like liability, in case somebody stepped on a D4, I guess. And so yeah, but that. If you've already got insurance, like house insurance or car insurance, you go talk to that person and say, this is what I need, and I think that cost maybe $250, for the year, which was not that big of a deal.
Sure. Okay. What other surprise hidden costs, when you were putting this together, or up until the point where you no longer were a part of OshCon, what was the biggest surprise expense that you think that came up?
I don't remember any big surprise expenses. The insurance was a bit of a surprise only because we didn't have it beforehand.
Sure.
So when the surprise of me not having the venue I thought I had happened, and I had to go talk to the university, and they told me the price, and I said, okay, that's totally reasonable. We can do that. Then they said, oh, by the way, there's also the insurance. At that point, when they said that, I had no idea how much the insurance might cost. Sure. So I went and talked to my insurance agency, and they said, this, and I said, okay, well, I can, work within that, and it should be okay. And then you just have to kind of work that into the cost. I was never trying to make any money. That was also a big deal. I was always trying to break as even as I could. So with the expense of the convention and the printing and the insurance and any other jazz, I was still charging only, I think, $6 to get in on Saturday as a player and $4 for Sunday.
Okay.
So it's $10 weekend if you're there, and if you're a vendor, the booths were, I think, like I said, I think they were $25 a table, and it was for both days. And it also came with one or two badges. I think probably two. So yeah, I mean, the trick is for a small convention when you're talking about 250 people max, you don't want to make it really expensive because people will balk at something like that. If you say, after you figured out your numbers and you can't barely break even without charging $15 for Saturday for a convention that you don't even know if 200 people are going to come to, you may need to look at a new venue,
Sure. Okay. Glenn, in your experience with doing GlenCon, how much of did you run into a lot of the same? You have a whole different set of issues now. The more I'm thinking about this and I'm speaking, because this is being done at Board Game Barrister, so you have the venue.
Yeah, I break all the normal things that most people who want to run a con have to worry about, because I don't have to worry about a venue, and because it's through the store, which also carries its own insurance, so I don't have to worry about that.
Sure.
And we have all the tables and chairs, so I mean, all I have to do is promote and get event runners. That's pretty much it. So I mean, my con is super easy to put on because so much of the logistics is already done because the place already exists for the purpose of playing games in. So.
Okay. Sure. Now, the other thing that's in comparison, I guess, to try to make a comparison is because the Board Game Barrister is attached to a mall, you have food on kind of on site. You have to leave Board Game Barrister to get the food. With OshCon, how did you was food even a thought when you put this together?
Yeah, it was. When we initially started, when it was in the basement of the Masonic Temple, food was kind of a problem in that there wasn't much real close by.
Sure.
One year, I convinced my parents to do hot dogs and like chips and sodas and have like a booth and sell that stuff. But then we had to get the health department to give us a license to sell hot dogs.
Sure.
Like that's a thing. It was like $40, and then at some point, like on Saturday, someone from the city came over and stuck their finger in the hot dog water, and they're like, "Yep, that's cool," and then left, and that's what we paid for. So, I mean, literally, well, maybe they had a thermometer. It wasn't just a finger, but still, they did something along those lines. And yeah, but we only did that maybe 1 or 2 years, and that was just a trip to Sam's Club or whatever to get stuff, and to sell. But once we moved to the university being the university, has tons of food around it that's not that far, a block away. You've got Papa John's, you've got Subway, you've got Jimmy John's, you've got a Thai place, a couple other places, so, a couple of Chinese restaurants. There was plenty of stuff going on around there, so that wasn't, that's never been an issue for that particular venue. But it is, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, Glenn and I both like to go to a convention in Manitowoc called Fire and Ice, and it's usually the last weekend in February. And that's at the Manitowoc County Fairgrounds. So there's nothing much around there without driving at least a mile to get someplace. And it's late February, so you don't want to walk a mile. And you're kind of in a field, but it's a good spot. They, however, in this space that they have a like a commissary almost or whatever. So they've got volunteers there who are making hot dogs and hamburgers and doing stuff like that, selling chips and cookies and sodas and all that jazz. So, that's also another revenue source for them. If you can get the people to do it and whatever, I mean, it works out great. Fire and Ice, that's about 500 to 600 people over the course of the weekend, and they've got a very big staff. That's a lot of people running that thing. So,
sure, okay.
Yeah.
Would you say that access to food will make or break a convention?
I think that if you want people to if people want to stay around, if you want people to stay around and kind of enjoy the convention more, as opposed to, well, I paid this money, came to the convention, played some games, but, well, then we kind of had to leave to go get food. There are some people that have no problem with that. They're in a new city maybe, and they're like, well, I want to go check out a local restaurant. And that's fine. That's part of the thing for them.
Sure.
Honestly, last year, Glenn and I and a couple other people went to some place in Manitowoc that I'd never been before, and we had some pretty decent hamburgers, really. And that was a lot of fun. But there are other people who are there to game, and that's their main thing. So they want to get some protein in them so they don't die, and then keep gaming. So for them, if you've got stuff on site, they're going to be real happy with it.
Okay. So I guess if we were to take away a few things here, one, if you can't afford it, don't do it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, honestly, that's the thing, because, you don't make money for the first... If you're trying to make money, I got to figure there are easier ways to make money in general.
Sure.
But if you're trying to at least make a little bit of profit, know that you're probably not going to for the first couple of years, just because there's things that you're going to have to try to figure out.
Sure.
Start small, grow slowly. That's honestly possibly the biggest takeaway, I think.
Yeah, I could see there being tremendous issues with having a great fluctuation between years of conventions. So if you plan big and it comes off really big, but next year it's not as big, then you're kind of on the hook for anticipated cash flow that was probably expected
and
for
I
the
think
previous year?
I think it's very difficult to start out with a big group. If you're completely untested, they've never heard of you before, your first year is going to be a lot smaller than you might think it is. So
Sure.
yeah, that's something to take into consideration.
Two, I think, in comparison of time frames from when you started to now, there's a lot more access to avenues of advertisement with social media. So
Absolutely, yeah.
It sounds like, at least in that particular regard, you're going to have some message management, as it were, that you or somebody else would have to take on to get the word out in a non-annoying fashion.
Yeah.
Which can be difficult for people that aren't used to social media.
And I think that, though, however, we're also seeing, you mentioned the word renaissance before, but we are seeing some of that in gaming in general, tabletop gaming. I mean, Gen Con, they mentioned in the most recent press release that they've doubled their attendance since 2010.
Wow.
Yeah, that's not that long ago. I've still easily got shirts from 2010, and it's just, I mean, it's an amazingly quick doubling, and there's tons of things you can blame it on. Not blame, but there's a lot of things you can pin it on, and because of that, you're starting to see even small conventions. You're seeing the numbers kind of growing to some degree. So that and social media do make it easier, I think, now versus when I started in the early 2000s. But it's still, it's not a particularly easy thing to do. But if you don't have a convention in your town, then yeah, I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't want to try to at least start something, even if it's just like originally like, we're going to get like 30 guys together and rent out this room in the supper club, and or something like that.
Sure.
And then maybe it'll turn into something. But yeah, if there's already a convention in your town, I would suggest, unless they really stink at it, like really bad, I would suggest trying to join forces in some fashion.
Yeah.
If you can, you know what I mean? Because more often than not, unless it's a big city, most cities don't really benefit from having two conventions.
Yeah.
I can see unless one is like completely focused on just, I don't know, military historical gaming, and then the other one's like a generalist kind of, regular tabletop gaming. That's fine.
Sure.
I can see that. But honestly, you could just have a bunch of tabletop or historical gaming happen at this other convention, and you guys will stay on one side, and everybody else will stay on theirs, and it would be fine.
Yeah, and it almost seems like it would be smarter, especially if they're related in some fashion, for you to team up and get more of a draw and probably get more exposure. Maybe people hadn't really thought about doing miniature wargaming, but you've got a tabletop thing, and maybe they get exposed to that. So I guess it could be very mutually beneficial to both parties to make that happen. That's a very good point. Okay. So getting back to the kind of the takeaways here, definitely need to have food. Food's a big thing. And depending on your point of view, if you don't have close access to food, it can be viewed as a kind of an inconvenience to have to wander off and get food.
To some degree, if it's a situation where you can't have food there,
sure, yeah,
that's a different story. Like if it's in a hotel, sometimes they're like, well, you can't bring food into the hotel, but then they probably have a restaurant themselves.
Yep.
I know there's a convention in Waupaca, Wisconsin, that is in a hotel. It's tabletop wargaming. It's just miniatures, and they pretty much just have the restaurant. So that's where you go. It's attached to the hotel, and that's where you go to eat. So yeah, it depends on where you're going. If it's some sort of convention center that doesn't have any kind of food service, they're probably not going to bust your chops if you tell your people, well, bring your own soda and chips or whatever, that kind of stuff. But it's totally dependent on the venue.
Okay. And getting volunteers to run games. You can't run all the games yourself.
No.
So
that part is definitely easier to delegate, and the way that you mainly delegate that is to usually gives some sort of benefit to the game masters.
Okay.
What I used to do at OshCon was if you ran at least 4 hours of stuff over the course of the weekend, you played for free. You didn't pay to get in. So 4 hours, and that was your $10. So what that did was it always made it so somebody, if they wanted to come and play basically for free, they would still run something. And you know, it might be two 2-hour things. They might do a 2-hour thing on Saturday and a 2-hour thing on Sunday, or they might just do one 4-hour thing. That pretty much almost always works out well. The only downside to that way is that sometimes you'll get somebody to be like, oh, that's great, I'm going to run some RPG, you know, that no one has made for, you know, 20 plus years, and which means, you know, oh, no one showed up because it was a terrible game that nobody liked. That really never technically happened, but I was always concerned that some guy was going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to come and play this game that nobody likes and run it for people, and then be like, oh, they never showed up, but that was my 4 hours. You know what I mean? And then we never had people game the system like that. We had people, you know, there were people who set up games and then had to take it all down because nobody showed, but generally that didn't happen too much. That's, I think, a good benefit, a good way to do it. I know that at Fire and Ice, they do, for every hour you run, you get a convention buck, which you can then put back onto your badge to basically pay for your badge sum, or you can use it to buy food at the little luncheonette thing there, or you can buy a T-shirt with it, or whatever. It's basically money that you can spend at the convention. Every hour that you do, you get a dollar or whatever.
Okay.
So, you know, that's a way, too, to get people to run stuff. And people I've always found people enjoy running stuff, you know, especially if you give them some sort of benefit. If there's no benefit at all to them to run stuff, you know, but they still got to pay to get into the convention and all that, I think it becomes difficult sometimes to get people to do it.
And, you know, to have a robust con experience, I think you definitely want to have, you know, a number of different games and gaming options available to folks. So that sounds like a good way to help kind of guarantee that kind of experience. So that's brilliant. Okay.
OshCon was mostly board games, but we did try to expand, and we did get some miniatures games that would go from time to time. We also had some Magic the Gathering, like drafts and things like that. Those would usually be put on by a store because they would, you know, they'd be there anyway with Magic. So if you want to do a draft, everybody kicks in whatever they kick in, $15, and they get 3 packs, and they do their thing or whatever. So that kind of stuff worked out well, but there were never any really big tournaments. That's maybe another point, is that sometimes the GMs, or the people running the event, will say, "Oh, I'm going to need, you know, table space for 40 people because I'm going to do a tournament of X, whatever it might be," and that never works. Like early on, people were like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to have 40 people at this tournament for this thing," and then they would have 4. And then we have all this space blocked for them, you know, and so after a while, what we did was we said, okay, well, the first 2 tables are free. If you're a GM, you want to run something, it's the first, you get 2 tables with your event. If you want to have a 3rd table, it's $4. But if you're running a tournament or something like that, you're probably charging a little bit extra for the tournament, so that you can cover your costs that way. And then we never had that problem anymore, really. We did have some people who were like, I want these extra tables for this space and stuff, and it was usually never a problem. Sometimes if it was a miniatures game or something like Twilight Imperium that takes up a lot of space, then yeah, they might get 3, maybe 4 tables, but then I'm not going to ding them the extra 2 or the extra $4 for the extra 2 tables. But you know, if someone came in towards the end there and said, yeah, we're going to do a Magic tournament, we're going to have 72 people, I'm like, I doubt you will, as it turns out. And then I would say to them, sure, we can set that space up, and here's what the cost is going to be. So,
sure, okay. So it's really kind of a case-by-case basis.
A little bit, yeah. But basically you put out there, this is what the price is, and then you decide whether you need to actually charge it. If it's a person who's running 3 tables because they need the extra space to put all their chits on for something like Twilight Imperium, okay, great. You can have that 3rd table, and that's fine. But if someone says, yeah, I need space for this many because I'm going to run a tournament, and I think people are going to somehow show, then you kind of have to say, well, okay, we'll do that, but it's going to cost you this much. And then they get to make the choice. Well, do I really think that many people are going to show? And it kind of goes from there, yeah.
Sure, okay. Glenn, in all that we've covered here, what are some things? Because your like we've said before, your con is different. What have we not covered that happens in your experience with GlenCon?
Most of what happens to me that wouldn't happen elsewhere just involves with it being in a store that I happen to manage.
Sure.
So I mean, because I mean, I don't have, the only vendor is actually my store.
Yeah. Yep.
So I don't have any of that stuff. And we have the same thing where you have people who we actually reward people who run games with our store. We have a system called it's MVP accounts. You get points that you can use for various things in the store, and we actually award points to people who run games. And I never really had anyone game that system either. I mean, I've had people who've come to run games and people didn't show up, but it's a lot of the same stuff where it's getting the volunteers at times can be a challenge. Even though in essence we're paying them something, it's not enough for some people to be motivated enough to do it. And we're also small enough, I think, where we don't get a lot of the hardcore gamers, I think, coming in, because they don't. Some people don't view us as like a full-fledged con. We're a store having a game day. So, and Milwaukee is just a weird fractured city when it comes to gaming and gaming groups. It's very, for lack of a term, cliquish.
Huh.
It really, really is. There are several game groups that I am members of all of them, but there are people who are members of them who are like, oh well, I'm in Group A, I won't play games with Group B.
Really?
Glenn and I have a common friend named Phil who has a belief about why that is so, and he likens it to the Tower of Babel. And the Tower of Babel, that was built up very high, and God got nervous, and then he broke it, and then he made all the people who had built it, that they all spoke different languages, so that they couldn't build a big thing like that anymore because they couldn't communicate. Phil believes that the Tower of Babel is Gen Con. So when God smote Milwaukee and took Gen Con away and moved it to Indianapolis,
Sure.
Then all of the gaming clubs basically disliked each other, so they couldn't build a new Gen Con. They couldn't build a new big convention. I think that's starting to go away. I mean, Nexus seems to be getting bigger and bigger, and the Midwinter thing is getting bigger. So maybe God has relented, or whomever. I'm not going to judge, but yeah, it's basically that story that our friend Phil thinks is what the case is.
Okay. Well, hopefully folks will listen to this, and if they don't have a convention in their particular neck of the woods, maybe they've got enough information here to start making something like that happen. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about the love of gaming, the love of kind of getting together and having and sharing a common interest with other people, and enjoying that thing that you both can enjoy together as a group, and tell stories or create good memories of fun games that you and other people love to play. And I think that's really what it's all about: sharing an experience with like-minded individuals, essentially. So
and the more that people go to these conventions, especially smaller local ones, the more people that they are going to meet and add to their gaming group that maybe they hadn't met or wouldn't meet before. I mean, through OshCon, I just, you could see people who, first met playing a game of Munchkin or something like that, and then year after year you see them hanging out together more and more, and then you hear them talking about, like, oh, well, we're going to see each other in 2 months when we get together in my town to do this or whatever and stuff. And so, you kind of foster that, and it's a good, I mean, gaming in general, by definition, is social, because you generally don't do it by yourself.
Yep.
So if you want to kind of enlarge your social circle, that's the way to do it. Local conventions are really the way to do it.
Sure. And last week, Glenn and I talked about. I'm sorry, I say last week. episode 11. So 9 episodes ago, we talked about building gaming groups and trying to find ways to do that. And going to a convention, you might find somebody that you could be a good fit for your gaming group. So
especially if it's a local convention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Going to Gen Con is difficult because you have no idea where those people are from, but going to a smaller convention that's local, definitely, it's a great way.
Yeah. So, all right. This is a wonderful subject, and I'm really glad that we were able to talk to you, Adam, and kind of get your experience and insight on that, and then compare it to Glenn's experience, which, entirely different points of view and execution, but again, the same outcome. Getting people to experience games, getting people to come together and enjoy the thing that they love to do. So, and that's really what it's all about. So, thank you very much for talking about that, guys. We're going to start to wrap things up here. We're going to talk about Hello, My Name Is. It's your opportunity to tell us about your favorite character that you are currently playing or have played in the past that you really, really love the heck out of that character. You can go to galacticnetcasts.com and click on the Adventure Party page, and you can fill out a short form and let us know about that character and that game system that you love so much. Maybe it was at a convention where you got this character started, or you got to really let that character shine. We'd love to hear about it. Yes, we do ask for your email address, but we don't spam people. We don't save addresses. Its only purpose is if we select your particular entry, we will send you a certificate about that character suitable for framing. So you can print it out and hang it on your wall if you so desire. That's available for you. Got some feedback over the past week that we wanted to share with folks. Going back to episode 7 with Patrick Rothfuss and talking about world building, Durantis, I hope I'm saying that right, said, I guess I would put Thieves' World in this category, and this is going back to talking about shared worlds and storytelling, and talking about possible, I think we were also talking about game systems in which Pat would recommend if you were to do something, or if he were to create a game around the Kingkiller Chronicles, what system he would use. That's what that episode was, kind of the major key points that we talked about. I guess I would put Thieves' World in this category, authors sharing a common world. I enjoyed this discussion very much. Thanks, Galactic. And we also got word from Nicholas Gunflog. This is about the episode with Roland Coons, and I'm sorry, I keep saying his name wrong. I feel bad. It's Roland Coons, and talking about art in games. And we had talked about Dungeons & Dragons 4, and Nicholas had to say, I don't absolutely revile D&D 4. I think it's excellent. It's a dungeon crawler. To eventually introduce noobs and gamers, not rollists, to RPGs, because they thought that Skyrim was an RPG. So I think our takeaway here is the approach for D&D 4 was to kind of try to take that computer and console role-playing game experience and try to translate that to a tabletop version. And I think that was the kind of the approach that they took with that particular edition, was to try to bring in tabletop players by trying to appeal to console and computer gamers. And
as a person who plays miniatures games, from what I had read about Fourth, it's got a lot of that kind of thing going on. It's got a lot of, you have to move these 3 hexes, and then you're in range to do this and that kind of stuff. And I think that, that and also the massively multiplayer online RPG people, I think it was trying to grab a little bit of both of those. And I don't know, I can't fault them for that, frankly, trying to expand their game and get it outside of the group of people who play it. But of course, then you do run the risk of annoying the people who do currently play your game.
Sure, and that's I managed to play with a Monday night gaming group, and we play Pathfinder, which is basically D&D 3.5. It's basically an offshoot of it. And there's no wrong way to play. If you're a power gamer, if you're into story, there's nothing. If you like a particular game system, good for you. And if you find other people that want to play that, that's awesome, because you're engaging and talking and being with other people, and you're sharing something you love with other people, and that's cool. So yeah, we probably did sound kind of snobby about D&D 4 looking back on that particular episode. But at the end of the day, and I think we've said this all along, is there's no wrong way to game. There is no bad game. There's just a game that appeals to you or does not. And that doesn't make it right or wrong. It just makes it something you either enjoy or you don't. And I guess there's no reason to draw lines over that. And he finished it off. Oh, I'm sorry. There were multiple paragraphs to this. I cut it off. And the fact that I've been using Master Plan with the original libraries. Master Plan? Does anybody know what Master Plan is? I didn't look that up ahead of time, so I apologize. Half HP for players and monsters, and added a crafting-ish system helped a lot. The alternate rewards made it much more interesting, too, but it's not an RPG, it's a G. So, there you go. Thank you for taking the time to share your opinion with us, Nicholas. We appreciate that. I want to thank Adam Loper for taking the time to talk to us about his experience with the creation and the continuation of OshCon, and giving us insight into, taking steps to, maybe put a gaming convention in your neck of the woods, or if you're going to maybe volunteer, maybe now you've got a little bit more insight of, what to expect, and you can take that experience, the voice of experience that Adam has given us, and you can raise those concerns, or maybe point out pitfalls that somebody else hasn't anticipated. So, where can people find out more about you and your work, Adam?
I've got a website, tabletopminions.org. It doesn't get updated quite as much as the channel, which is on YouTube, and that is youtube.com/tabletopminions.
And how often do you do your episodes of Tabletop Minions?
I try to do about one a week. Sometimes I succeed, but sometimes I don't. So yeah, generally, hopefully about once a week, once every 2 weeks. Okay. They usually run about anywhere from 6-7 minutes to the last one I did, which was the Gen Con wrap-up that I did, was kind of a behemoth at about 23 minutes.
And you said earlier that you've been doing this for over 2 years?
Yeah, I started in March of 2013, and I've been doing it since then. And I'm just a little over 9,500 subscribers, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, and I was hoping I was going to hit 10,000 before Gen Con, but it didn't quite work out. So, yeah. Okay.
Well, yeah. Because there's 2 years worth of material, we highly recommend you go and check out Adam's page, his channel on YouTube, Tabletop Minions, and there's plenty of content for you to jump down that rabbit hole and check out Adam's work. So, Glenn, also, where can people find out about you?
Me? People want to find out about me? That's so sweet. You can find me on the Facebooks, both my personal account as well as Naked Hope Productions and the B-Movie Bunker, and Mr. Under the RPG and Apocalypse Hell, the card game. You can also find me on the YouTubes with Naked Hope Productions and B-Movie Bunker, and follow me on Twitter at Naked Hobo.
I'll never get over that name. It makes me laugh every time I hear it. You can find Adventure Party by going to galacticnetcasts.com. There you will find all of our social media outlets and our YouTube channel, where you can see the video version of the Adventure Party, and where we typically share if we're talking about a Kickstarter game, we'll flash a picture for you to see what they're talking about, especially if we're describing a board or something like that. So, check us out on YouTube. If you're using iTunes or Stitcher, take a moment and give us a review and let us know what you think. Your reviews, positive or negative, can help shape the Adventure Party and help make it a better show. Also, the comments the feedback that we got from Nicholas and Dranthus were on our YouTube channel, so you can also contact us there and let us know what you think about some of our past episodes. You can leave us feedback by emailing galacticnetcasts@gmail.com, or you can call or text the number 805-328-3966. Again, that's 805-328-3966. And you can leave a message or you can text us, like I said. You can also go to galacticnetcasts.com, and on the right-hand side we have a WordPress plugin where if you have a headset or a microphone attached to your computer, you can click the icon, the bar on the right-hand side, and you can send us a message directly off the website. So that's kind of a nice little convenience there for you. Thank you so much for joining the Adventure Party. May your characters never die and your adventures always be epic. Thank you.